Welcome to the second of many series on holistic health and natural stroke recovery. Thank you all for the opportunity to present once again and share information. Today, well, the last one we did was covering healthy eating, fasting, and healthy diet. And then today we're going to be talking about meditation. Meditation is a very, very, very important skill to have. One of my colleagues at Morgan State University, he's one of my fellow researchers there, he just sent us an article about the so-called natural decline of cognitive functioning that happens with age, and how neuroscientists are now saying that by switching up your lifestyle, you can actually combat that decline, right? So part of some of the things that they said that you should do or could do was, one, change up your diet, right? And number two was begin to meditate and do yoga. It's all these things, and it's like these are neuroscientists saying these things as if this is something new. And what we all know, or what at least what we're going to find out, and have more information about today, is that these are actually very ancient practices. And I always say that science is going to forever be, science in quotation marks, is going to forever be trying to catch up with nature, right? Because when you live a natural way of life and you observe nature, then you get the keys to natural living, right? And so I almost replied to my colleague, like, put this in the Dove files, because it's my lifestyle. But I was going to say that jokingly, but I didn't do it because I didn't want them to take offense and thinking that I was just kind of dismissing this very valuable information that they were sharing. But I was going to be doing it jokingly anyway, because anytime more people are advocating for us to use natural means or holistic means to at least prevent, if not also treat and address potential ailments, I'm okay with that. Because there was a point in time where I didn't know. And it's nothing worse than I've been through that type of person, or I've been through that type of response. Because a lot of people get into that I've been through that type of, situation. It's like, yeah, but it was a time that you didn't. So I always figure that humility is the best way to approach this stuff. So if somebody was able to wake up because of that recent article, the article has done its job. But it's really interesting. So similarly, like what I said last time, when people end up going to the hospital for something like high blood pressure or any type of cancer or any type of disease, chronic disease, one of the things that they're often told to do is to change up their diet, right? And so when I'm talking to young people about changing their diet, I often tell them that, young people who are raised with a quote-unquote more healthy diet, one of the things I often tell them is that you're doing the right thing, because they get into their peer groups, and their peers like to put pressure on them, like, good, you ain't never had a Big Mac attack, you ain't never had pig feet, whatever it is. And I always tell the kids, like, be okay with that, because then you can also say to them, what, you ain't never had Thai food? What, you ain't never had Ethiopian food? You ain't never ate vegan or vegetarian? What? Throw it just right back at them, because the same way you haven't had the stuff that they're having, they haven't had the stuff that you're having. And don't be tricked into thinking that because this other stuff is popular and their way of life is more popular, that somehow it's better. So because what happened is, if they, God forbid, if they ever end up in the hospital because of some type of chronic disease, the doctor is going to tell them to do what you are already doing. And so hopefully, the fact that you are already doing it will help to prevent you ever having to go in and experience the stuff that they're going to have to experience as a result of having a disease. And of course, if they're kids, they're like, huh? They're still like, huh? But the idea is that the seed has been planted, and just try to encourage them to stand strong in their way of life without apology. Right? So anyway, today we're talking about meditation, and you will see as we continue to progress with this series in the sessions that are to come, we'll see that they are all connected. So what we talked about last month with the diet directly impacts what we're talking about today with meditation. And the connection there are many. The connections are many. One of the connections is, and I'll show y'all in a few slides going forward, that there's this thing called a tree of life, or the Puat Neteru. You saw the tree of life in the Old Testament. Look to your neighbor and say, neighbor?
Neighbor?
The tree of life.
Tree of life.
It's in the Old Testament, y'all. And it's there with the, so Adam and Eve rebelliously, defiantly ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, right? You remember that part, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but the part that often is not pointed out was the next tree. And God said, uh-oh, they done ate of that tree. Now let's put a cherubim, or it was a seraphim. One of them was either cherubim or a seraphim. I think it was a cherubim in front of this next tree, the tree of life, with a flaming sword that turns every which way. So now there's a cherubim guarding the tree of life with a sword that's on fire, lest they eat of that tree and become immortal like us, is what's stated. Y'all ever seen that part?
I ain't listen, that's crazy.
It's right there though. It ain't written in red, so we can't say Jesus said it, but it's there. It says, God, Elohim, which is plural, said, they ate of the, basically I'm paraphrasing for all my biblical scholars out there. I don't want them like, here's not what it says. It's paraphrasing this. In substance, this is what was said. It said that they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So now, let us guard the tree of life with the cherubim, with a flaming sword that turns every which way, lest they eat of that tree too and become immortal like us, is what's stated next. So you got to say, whoa, okay, wait a minute now. So there's another tree. And it's not the tree of knowledge, it's the tree of life. And if they eat of this tree of life, they being us, humans, if they eat of this tree of life, that means that now you become immortal. So it's like, whoa, well, what is this tree of life thing? And so there have been many interpretations of this tree of life. There are many ancient systems that have actually been developed as representations of this tree of life, with the processes of realizing your immortality, not becoming immortal, but realizing the immortality of your soul. Because more traditions on this planet than not recognize the immortality of the soul, including modern Christianity. What happens when you die, according to modern Christianity? Where does your soul go?
Either heaven or hell.
Heaven or hell.
But your soul is always...
It's still alive. It's still present, right?
Exactly.
That's immortality of your soul, right? So it's not that you become it, you realize it. And if you realize it while still alive, and you know that you've got a decision of which way it's going to go once you shed this, then now you can start doing things differently to ensure which way you're going to go. One of those things is how you eat, how you live, and how you interact. There's a scene, I don't know if I got the image in the slide or not, but if we take a break, I'll find it if it's not in here. But it's a judgment scene from ancient Egypt. And in the judgment scene, you've got your divine self, God, sitting on the throne. And then there's this lotus flower in front of God. And there are these 4 figurines, humanoid figurines, that look like people standing on top of this lotus flower. And then on the other side, facing the judge, is the soul of the person that's died. So it's the judgment scene. And these 4 figures that are standing on the lotus flower represent what they call canopic jars. And each one of these jars is a particular organ from your body. So you've got your intestines in there, you've got the lungs in there, you've got the liver in there, and I'm blocking the 4th one. It'll come back to me. Maybe the stomach. It'll come to me in a minute. But each one of these are facing the judge. And these are the organs of the deceased person. And so my understanding of that scene is that your organs are testifying against you in Judgment Day. Think about this for a minute. It's like, how are your organs testifying against you during Judgment Day? We got to remember back then, the person that did the embalming of the body was an initiated priest. It wasn't somebody who just went to mortuary science school and had enough money to start their own morgue and, funeral home. It ain't that. These people were literally initiated into the science of death. And remember, they preserve bodies that you can dig up to this day that are still fully intact and have not decayed. So it lets you know that they had something going on thousands and thousands of years ago. So they would remove the lungs, for example, and they would examine the lungs. And the lungs would tell what? How you lived your life. If the lungs were caked up with tar and the sacs, hey, I'm blocking the name of the sacs inside the lungs right now. Forgive me, y'all. But the condition of your lungs talked about how you live. And so if you worked in the mines or something that had a bunch of horrible gases in it, your lungs would reflect that. If you smoke 50,000 packs a day, your lungs will reflect that. Your lungs are testifying against you in death. Same with your liver. If you were a heavy drinker, cirrhosis of the liver, your liver's going to tell on you. And this is, so in other words, how did you treat your body? The number one gift that God gave you, how did you treat it when alive? It shows in death. And so that's the science of that judgment scene. It recognized the immortality of the soul. That's the whole point of that. And so there are these different systems that talk about this tree of life and guarding. How many of y'all have ever went past a guard. Anybody ever got past a guard in your life?
You talking about like a security guard or
Yep.
like going to the airport, something like that?
TSA at the airport.
TSA.
Perfect. Yep. Going into any building where you got to check in at the front desk before they let you go by.
Yeah.
Yeah. I passed the guard coming in here. My buddy was at the desk. He said, sign in. I signed in, and guess what? I got passed. Right? You ever go to any type of Nation of Islam event? You're gonna get patted down. You got to pass the guard. Mm-hmm. But there are some situations where you're not going to get past the guard, right? Mm-hmm. If you go try to get past TSA with something that you can't get past TSA with, they're gonna say, hey, you can take it back and check the bag. You can throw it away right here, or you can just not get on the plane. And if it's something, you just don't get arrested. But the point is that a guard doesn't prevent you from going past. You just got to be able to get past. Mm-hmm. And so this guard in the tree of life, that cherubim with the flaming sword that turns every which way, is to prevent a certain type of person from approaching the tree of life. Not everybody, just a certain type of person. And the way that I interpret the flaming sword is got fire. So when I was a Rasta man, we called it purifier. And more fire, lightning and brimstone. I used to pray for like judgment. That's so profound to me that there's a group of people on this planet that actually prays for Judgment Day to come. A lot of people fear Judgment Day. Mm-hmm. I Rasta man, like, bring it right here, right now. Why? Because they can show their hands and they can show their heart. It's like, it's pure. So I know where I'm going when Judgment Day comes. How about you? Matter of fact, let's bring it right now and find out. I've never experienced that with other groups of people. It was a phenomenal experience. I love it. It was a major transition point for me anyway. Keep a certain type of person away. So purifier. If you had nothing to burn off, you didn't have to worry about the flames on that sword. Because you didn't have anything that was flammable on you. You didn't have anything that needed to be purified anymore. The sword, discipline. You got anything that needs to be cut? Anything that needs to be cut out in your ways? Your thinking, your movement, get prepared to get cut then. We trimming the fat before you can get past here. But if you had already disciplined yourself where there's nothing to be cut away, guess what you can do? You can approach the tree of life. And do what? Become immortal. In other words, realize and recognize the immortality of your soul. This is what more people on this planet believe than not. Our understanding of what it is to be a human being has been shifted, has been skewed, has been lessened. Nobody in here, but the people that signed up and didn't come, they believe that we are only human, right? Well, to err is human, right? We've heard these things before. In fact, as human beings, we were also taught that we were born in what? Sin, right? We believe that we're born sinners. So now the expectation is so low for the things that we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to carry ourselves that anything seems to be progressive at this point. Mm. Very deep. We start off with the bar in hell. I'm a born sinner. To err is human. I'm only human. So now we got all kind of excuses. So that means that the fact that I just ain't a mass murderer, I'm supposed to get brownie points for it. Right? But if we flip that and to say that as opposed to being the descendants of apes, because that's the other thing about evolution, we're supposed to be evolved apes, right? But if instead of being evolved apes, like the theory of evolution says, if we said that we are descendants from God, and then we measured ourselves, it's like, oh, snap. We've fallen a long, long way, because if we descended from that which is responsible for everything, then that means that we're missing a lot of capabilities that we naturally have. But if we think that we're evolved apes, then that means that we're doing damn good, right? Put us put us next to some apes. We'd like to see what the apes doing. We see what we're doing. We look like we're doing something. Mm. Put us next to God. It's like, ooh. You mean to tell me I couldn't figure out how to get my car started this morning when it was acting like it didn't want to start? You mean I lost the capability to manifest a car that's going to start? You mean to tell me that I couldn't avoid eating chips? Leaning back on an earlier example. Okay, I was like, you hear me? You mean to tell me that I couldn't kick this craving? I've fallen a long way. Mm. Y'all follow? Yeah. And so, with that type of skewed perspective, we've lost tools. We're walking around in this world believing that we're Clark Kent, which is really Clark Kent. And in reality, we are divine, Superman and Superwomen. Mm-hmm. Kal-El was his name. Superman's name is called El. The El is the God part. So it shows that he was a God, he had a God nature. And when he was asked call El or Superman, or what humans call Superman, then they realized like, whoa, you got super speed, flying. You can fly so fast around the earth, you can reverse time. Super cool breath, you can freeze stuff, lasers of beams coming out your eyes, super strength, your hair is stronger than people, right? But when you're functioning as Clark Kent, you're bumbling, you're stumbling, you're fragile. That's the setup. And so when you have series such as this one, my understanding is to help us to better understand who and what we are as human beings. We got to start there, because then you know the capabilities that you have. And there's nothing strange about anything that I've said so far. It's just a different way of looking at what's already been pointed out to us. I didn't make up the tree of life. I didn't make up the cherubim with the flaming sword. All of that is in the book, the good book. It's right there. That's where I got it from. The only thing that I've developed is a different understanding of what that actually means and the implications for us. So on the tree of life, the reason why I even brought the tree of life up is because you will see later that there are stages to this tree of life. There are different stops. In the Hebrew, it's called a sephirah, or spheres. And each of the spheres has its own property. And then there are lines that connect the spheres. There are lines that connect the spheres that are called paths. And so if you got a path that connects a fiery energy with a watery energy, there's a particular type of road you got to travel to get from the fire to the water. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go. But each one of these paths are designed to awaken and or develop a particular characteristic that you have as a human being. And so the very first part of it is, we call it Geb in the Kemetic or the Egyptian language, and it's called Malkuth in the Hebrew language. It's the very first one, and it correlates with the physical being. All of that to say that the first one about fasting and a healthy diet naturally leads to our ability to meditate better. Because if you're in an uncomfortable place in your body, whether it be pain because you just stubbed your toe, whether it's hunger, whether it's fatigue, whether it's migraine, headaches, all of those things distract away from you being able to do what? Focus. Being able to meditate. Being able to think about anything other than what? The pain that you're experiencing, the discomfort that you're experiencing. So it occupies so much of your mental space and so much of your, what we call life force or chi, your energy, that you don't have too much to do anything else with. That's why a lot of times when people are sick, they want to sleep a lot, right? You sleep a lot, one, to psychologically get a break from having to deal with your pain so much or your discomfort so much, but also because pain is draining. Illness is draining. And so when you can get that together, not saying perfect health, but at least approaching and headed in the direction of better health. When you're not so burdened with eating all day and eating drugs masquerading as food all day, so then your body is taxed with trying to digest and process this stuff, you have a lot more energy to do other things with, right? So that's why that was the first step, part of the reason why that's the first step. It's also the first step because it's the last stop when it comes to creation and manifestation. So you've got, let's talk about, let's talk about, like, for example, like when Trazana had the idea to put this series together, right? It was just that. It was an idea. Come on, you fine. I know. It was an idea at some point. And she was able to take it from an idea, wherever that idea came from, and do what? Bring it into physical reality. So it's the last stop on the path to creation. Y'all follow me? Yes, no, maybe so?
Yes.
Okay, and feel free, if something I say makes you have a question, for clarification purposes, go ahead and ask me the question, all right? For clarification, I don't want us to go off on a tangent and talk about other things, but I will clarify anything that I've said, okay? Yes.
So could you say that again? Repeat it.
Which part?
You said the last step.
The last stop on the path to creation, right? Okay, and so what that means is this. Let's say I'm an artist, I'm a painter, and I've got this idea to paint a picture of a car, right? And so the idea came, the idea is not physical yet, right? I don't have a painting yet. but I got this idea. I woke up this morning like, man, I could paint this dope car. It's like, okay, cool. So now I got the idea. Now what starts happening? I start seeing what this car is going to look like, right? It's going to be a sports car. It's going to be an SUV. It's going to be this color, have this type of wheels on it. It's going to be able to drive this fast. It's going to look like that car I've seen before, blah, 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 blah. And then the last stop is what? What's the last stop?
Creation.
I actually sit down and I paint that joint, right? And so that's why creation is that's the last stop. The physical manifestation is the last stop on the path to creation. It started with nothing. Because I didn't have the idea before I did, right? Right? There was no idea to paint the car until that idea to paint the car came from wherever it comes from. And then once I get the idea, I can develop the idea all the way to the point of actually painting it. And at the same time, we get ideas that we never do anything about all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get the idea, we can even dream about it. We can envision it, we can have a strong desire for it, but for whatever reason, we still may not ever take any steps towards actually bringing it into physical fruition or manifestation. You get it? Does that help to explain it a little bit?
Yeah.
Cool.
Sure.
So that's the first, the physical manifestation, which correlates with our physical health or the condition of our physical experience. And then the next step is literally the consciousness sphere. Altered states of consciousness, which meditation is a part of, right? And so that's why we're here now, meditation. And meditation is a tool, and I'm going to go ahead and start using the PowerPoint. Let me scoot this over, actually. Notice I'm blocking. So, I think this should get it. Yeah. Okay, so meditation is a tool. And at the first part of it, it might be kind of wordy, okay? And it's just because I want to make sure that we get formal definitions out the way. So it's according to Ron Nefer Ben. Ron Nefer Ben is one of my spiritual teachers. Y'all probably seen his book called The Medu Netter. It's the sky blue book. He's one of my spiritual teachers, and the organization that he founded is called the Osira Set Society. And that's where I first learned the practical application of meditation, and even the philosophical understanding of it in the background, right? Phenomenal group. Shout out to all my spiritual teachers that are within that organization. Very powerful. Very devoted. That's part of my spiritual family, no doubt about it. But he says that the fundamental objective of meditation is the expansion of consciousness to embrace all the divisions of the spirit, as well as the original and essential state of your being. This comes from his book called The Tree of Life Meditation System. It's on page 21. Let's break this down a little bit. And this is kind of deep stuff, okay? And so, again, we can talk about it as much as y'all want to. I can go and explain as much as you need me to. But this is a powerful statement here about meditation. The primary objective, the fundamental objective, expansion of consciousness. So when you talk about expansion of consciousness, I mentioned it before. You got a whiteboard with flip paper or anything? If you don't know of anything, right off the hand, don't worry. But if you can find one, that'd be great.
Whiteboard or just paper?
If you got a whiteboard, that's perfect. If you got a big flip chart, that'd be better, because I won't be able to see it. But either way, we're fine. I can describe it without it, but if we get it, that's good. So when we're talking about the expansion of consciousness, I alluded to it earlier when we were talking before we got started, that consciousness has two different aspects to it, the way that I define it. You've got awareness, meaning how receptive and perceptive are you of the things around you and within you. That's the awareness. And then you have awakeness. Awakeness is the continuum of death on one end to super awake. All right? Like the brain is, you know what I'm saying, you're active, you're moving, right? You can look at somebody and say, okay, they're alive. Right? Not only are they alive, but they're high energy alive, right? So you got these two extremes, death and alive. You got everything in between there, including sleep. And to quote the great philosopher Nas, also known as Nasir Jones, sleep is the cousin of death. It's a joke. All right, no? All right, not today. I said, not today. So anyway, you've got this extreme of consciousness. So you've got awareness, how perceptive you are of what's going on around you and within you, and then you've got awakeness, from death to wide awake or alive. Okay. And so expansion of consciousness means that you expand how aware you are, how receptive you are to things. So we could all be looking at the same birds pecking on the ground. Some of us might be like, "Ugh, that's a lot of birds," and get nervous. That's it, you stop right there. Some walk out and don't even notice the birds pecking. Somebody else would recognize the birds and say, "Huh, it must be about the rain." Because they have some type of awareness that where somewhere or another they learn that when birds are found to be pecking on the ground in mass like that, they're usually preparing for a storm this time, right? But some people, again, so you can go from being aware, like you didn't even notice the birds, you notice the birds, and you have an interpretation of what the birds might be about. Even know what type of birds it is, and you can relate the type of birds with the season, where we are in the cycle of seasons, and understand, okay, they must be getting ready to fly south, right? You got people to keep with the birds. We could walk out of here, and there might be a V formation of birds flying overhead. You know, a lot of us ain't looking up. A lot of us going out like this, left the building like this, ain't paying no attention. Some of us might look up and see the birds and hope you don't get pooped on. And somebody else might look up at the birds and recognize again the cycle of time and say, those birds, they must be headed south. And you know your directions. You're like, okay, that's north. Okay, they're headed south. They're migrating. They're headed west. They're migrating. Different levels of awareness, right? Some is that you don't even know it's there. Others you know it's there and you have an interpretation. Now, the awakeness part of it. So that's, I'm sorry. So let's apply that awareness to embrace all the divisions of the spirit. That means that you are increasing your awareness that one, there are divisions of your spirit. Well, let me back up, that you have a spirit. Some people don't even know that there are different components to being a human being. We know it intrinsically, we know it innately, like we know that we have this body, but then we also know that there's something that is inside of this body. There is something that's using your eyes to see that you can't use your eyes to see. Take a deep breath, because that'll have you holding your breath. That's called suspense. That's what suspense movies are about. It's suspending of your breath. You suspend breathing because you're trying to conserve all energy so that you can understand what the heck just happened. And so that statement was like, wait a minute, what did he just say? There's something that uses your eyes to see that you can't use your eyes to see. So right now we're all looking, right? That's you looking. You're not the eyes that are looking. The eyes are the tools that you are using to see. But you can't use those same eyes to see what it is that's using your eyes to see. You're going to look in the mirror, and you're going to see the eyes looking back at you. But you can't see what it is that's actually using the eyes. And so my neuroscientist friends, they said, well, it's the brain. You have the optical nerve, comes off the back of the eye. You have the retina that comes off the back of the eye. Then you have the optic chiasm where they cross over. The opposite hemisphere of the brain, it goes back to the occipital lobe of the brain. He said, yeah, that's true. Those are the mechanics. That's the mechanism, right? But you still tell me what's using that mechanism to see and to add interpretation. Many can't answer that question. But that's what Ron F. Ahmed is saying. You expand your consciousness to not only recognize that you have divisions of your spirit, but the fact that you've got a spirit anyway. And where does that spirit fit into the grand scheme of things? Yes, ma'am.
Is that intuition?
Is what intuition?
The eyes, not
what's
the
using?
physical eyes, yes.
No.
The spiritual eyes.
Intuition is another tool.
Okay.
Intuition is another tool, just like thinking is a tool. Just like feeling is a tool. And those are all tools that you use, just like you use your eyes.
Right.
So the thing is like, it's your soul, it's your spirit, it's you. It's the part of you that's not the physical you.
Okay.
And it's the part of you that most religions on the planet says continues on after the physical body is gone. Right? And so that's from what I understand, it's you that's using your eyes. But we've been taught to identify fully with our physical body.
Okay.
And so again, that's why this meditation piece is kind of like a progression to better understanding who and what you are. Right? So we have to break that mold of, I'm just human, I'm only human, I am this body, I am the limitations of this body, and start to understand that even with the limitations of this body, I'm fully capable of doing more. And that's why I told you, I think, in our early conversations after you had your strokes is, I told you what I've often thought about strokes, and I've wondered about, like, you know, are people prisoners in their bodies? You know, like, so if a person can't quote unquote, properly articulate something, do they know what they're trying to articulate? And the body and the brain, this vehicle is just not cooperating with what they're trying to do.
Teach.
And that's deep, because that's a true experience of, wait a minute, I'm more than this thing. Because there's a part of me that wants to say, give me an apple, but for some damn reason, I can't give me an apple to come out. I've got the feeling of I want an apple, even if I can't think, give me an apple, because there's something going on here too. I know that I want an apple right now. And for some reason, I can't get this other part of me to line up with this part of me that's clearly the director of this part of me. So this part is now being oppositional and defiant at this point. It's not listening to what I'm telling it to do. Right? That's a clear experience of the separation of body and some other aspect of yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
You was about to say something?
No, I was totally agreeing with you.
Yeah.
It's like when I first had my stroke, I was diagnosed with aphasia too. So I couldn't verbally communicate, because I was thinking everything. I heard everything, but I couldn't get it out. So it's like my language was detached from my brain. My intellect didn't leave,
Right.
but everything physical I had no control over.
So you had the intellect, but you couldn't express it
Yes,
in a way that people could receive it.
yes,
You know? Because the other part of this is this. We've got a division of our spirit that communicates spirit to spirit without the need for the physical part. And that's how sometimes you ever been thinking about somebody and they show up, or thinking about somebody and they call. You're about to call somebody, you pick up, well, back when we had phones that you would pick up. You call somebody, you pick up the phone and they already on there and your phone didn't ring. Right? Or even with the cell phones. About to call somebody, you pick it up, you see you got a missed call from them. You're sitting somewhere, and for some reason you turn around and look, and you lock eyes with somebody who was staring at you. Right? There's an aspect of us that communicate without the necessity of the physical parts of us. Right? And so all of these things were known in ancient civilizations and ancient societies. Right? Ancient processes of human development. It was a part of natural human development to develop these various aspects of yourself. And that's what Ron Ephraim is talking about, these divisions of the spirit. And expanding our consciousness, meaning our awareness of these. And not only our consciousness and awareness of it, but our ability to utilize them. So that's where you go back to intuition as a tool. One of the things that you design or develop through meditation is your intuition. So that you learn how to be more intuitive. And I literally made a tool for that. There was this researcher named J.B. Ryan from Duke University. And he came up with these quote-unquote ESP cards. And it was like a plus sign, a star, a square, some wavy lines, a circle. And the whole thing was to be able to project from your mind to the mind of another person what this card is that I'm looking at. Or if you're doing it solo, you want to be able to see what the symbol is before you turn over and look at the actual symbol. And that would demonstrate the ability to do things beyond just beyond physical proximity, as well as beyond verbal or any other type of measurable form of communication. And so I was like, okay, so I made my own cards to do that. I'll show y'all in a little bit, but it was the tool of intuition, and meditation helps to develop that as well. That's one of the other divisions of the spirit. And when we pull up the tree of life later, I'll show you where on the tree of life intuition is actually developed, right? Which stage of the game it's actually developed in. So that's the expansion of consciousness in order to embrace all divisions of spirit in a nutshell. And as well as the original essential state of your being. And so that part of the statement is really profound as well, because what Ron Ephraim is saying is that through meditation, not only do you get a chance to know that you have different parts of your spirit, not only do you get the opportunity to utilize these different parts of your spirit, but in doing that, you get closer to the awareness of what you truly are, which is a divine being. Your God self, in other words. You get closer, you eat of the tree of life now, and now you realize your immortality, like Elohim said in the book of Genesis. Lest they become immortal like us. And then later on, it is written in red. It says, doesn't your book say ye are gods? That's Jesus talking. Say, wait a minute. How y'all trying to flex on me for saying that my Father God and I are one. Your book says it too. We don't get those lessons though. This process of meditation is more than just being zenned out and what popular culture is doing nowadays. You know, we put on some yoga pants and you know what I mean, start wearing hemp necklaces and stuff. Peace. That ain't it.
Yeah, facts.
It's a revolutionary process of reclaiming who and what you actually are. And when you begin on this path to do that, physical elements are different for us, right? Physical capabilities are different for us. Our mental capabilities are different for us. Prayer is something different for us now too, because now we have shortened what we thought was a distance between us and God. We've shortened that distance to where it's like we're not praying to something that's way out there somewhere. We're like, wait a minute. If God is omnipresent, that means that there is nowhere that God is not, including within me. That's what omnipresent means, right? All present, everywhere. Omnipotent, all powerful. That means that there ain't nothing that God can't do. So if God is within me and something needs to get done, I ain't got to pray way out somewhere to some God floating up in the clouds. I'm looking right here. Now, I don't have to wonder if it's being heard. I ain't have to say nothing in this knowing. So we got omnipresent, omnipotent, and omniscient, meaning all-knowing. That there is nothing that I cannot know. And therefore, there's nothing that what I cannot do. And there's nowhere that I cannot be, because I'm everywhere at the same damn time. So that's what this whole thing is talking about. So this meditation is a tool, according to Ron F. Amen, not only understanding who and what you are, activating who and what you are, and expanding on what you think you are, to the ends of recognizing your divinity.
I'm sorry.
No,
I
I'm
remember when you first started, well, we go way back.
Way back.
And I remember everything. But one thing that always, I wake up in the morning repeating this to myself, you taught me, was to be conscious of God. To understand God completely. And to know God means to be one with one's own divine self. And that, to me, is exactly what you're talking about. And that I learned that from you.
Wow, thank you. And I learned that from him, from Ron and from him. That's what this is about. That's what church is about. That's what any religious institution is supposed to be about. And on paper, it is what it's about. Now, if we have the actual consciousness as practitioners to actually teach that, it's a whole other story. Because again, we got to remember at one point in time, religious leaders were actually initiated. Religious leaders actually had to go through a process of awakening these various aspects of themselves before they claimed to be able to lead other people in that same process. Nowadays, and I'll show you when we pull up the tree of life, it's relegated to mostly just the intellectual aspect of it. It's mostly just intellectualism. It's emotionally fueled. But when the last time y'all had a religious leader tell y'all how no weapon formed against you shall prosper? When the last time y'all heard somebody give you the science behind that?
Never the science behind it.
You ain't gonna get it.
Scripture.
You get the scripture, you get the saying,
Yeah.
but you don't get the instruction. Think about that. That person telling you that is supposed to be able to give you the instruction on how to do that, or at least they should know and be able to lead you on the path to where you are developed to the point to where you can receive that instruction. So they should at least know it. I would bank that they don't even really know it. And I would bank even more that the majority of them don't even know that there is something to know. That there is a process to where no weapon formed against you shall prosper. And it might manifest as a bulletproof vest. Well, it might. That's making sure that some weapons ain't going to prosper. But that's on the scientific side. And it may not be seen as a manifestation of that scripture. But then you got other people to where you can take a razor blade and try to cut their arm and it ain't going to cut. You see Jesus in the temple when they was coming after him and he disappeared amongst the multitude. They couldn't find him. He was still there. They couldn't see him. That's no weapon formed against you prospering too. We don't get this scientific instruction on how it's supposed to be done. It's because our religious leaders, no slight to anybody, because it's designed to be this way. Our religious leaders oftentimes are not cultivated and developed in what it is that they're actually preaching. Yes.
I tell you, I'm now a follower of Yeshua HaMashiach. However, it is this teaching that you're giving right now that helped me understand, because I would ask the question, what is this thing about this blood? I was very curious about the power of this blood. What does this blood look like? You know, what is this blood? But it was these type of teachings right here that you're giving right now to help me understand that message.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate you, brother.
Thank you. And I don't know how it's happening, but that's what's up. Because I mean, we would have to do a lot to understand, you know, when you say the blood and all that type of stuff. So I don't know, personally know the connection there, you know, but that's what's up. You know what I'm saying? If it's something that you can see in it that helps to relate, to help you to better understand something else, I'm all for it.
Well, can I get
Well, no, I don't want us to go off on that, because that's, you know, because that's beyond the scope of what we're actually doing today. But no, that's what's up, because that's a part of the expansion of consciousness, right? The expansion of understanding who and what you are, how things apply. That's dope. And that's what it's about. Yes.
Part of that statement where it says as well as original and essential state of being.
Yeah.
Is that referring to past lives, maybe?
It's referring to your soul and the immortality of it. Mm-hmm. And so from that respect, yes. Because if your soul is immortal, and some spiritual systems, religious systems, and cultures say that your immortal soul gets multiple opportunities to come here in physical form. Some do say that. And then on this end of it, looking back at those, we would call those past lives. You see, but the
original and essential. So when you say the original, that's why I asked that.
Mm-hmm. So the original version is the part that is capable of having past lives, not the past lives themselves. So the original part is the immortality of your spirit or your soul. The part of you that was present prior to you being born as who you are right now.
Right.
And that part of you that will be present after this particular form of you has gone, right? Yeah. So that's the essential part of your being. And not only that, the immortality of it, but then all of the other characteristics of it. You know, it is conscious, it is aware. That part of you does have, it has not only consciousness and the will, but it can also impact energy and matter. And we'll talk about that when I pull the tree of life up. Yep. The game is deep. So, you know, meditation, we thought, oh, it's meditation, like we're going to just the whole time. And we'll get to that, you know, but that's so far down the road. But that's where most people try to enter in. They try to go straight there. They're like, this meditation stuff don't work. You know, you might be able to do it and address high blood pressure. You know, you might be able to do it to alleviate stress to a certain degree. But to get maximum efficiency and maximum effectiveness of it, you know, we got to go back a little bit. We got to peel back some layers and get a deep understanding of what it is that we actually talking about. So that way, when we get to that breathing and stuff, you know, we next level with it. Let me skip these divisions of the spirit, okay? I mean, I've talked about it already in a nutshell, but it's I don't want us to get caught. I don't want us to get lost in the language of it. But it's pretty much everything that I've already said. You've got consciousness and it's establishing your body. We're talking about the original and essential nature of you, all right? And then we've got the part that talks about the wisdom and the knowledge and understanding the function and the makeup of all things. Y'all remember that movie, Gods of Egypt? Mm-hmm. It came out and it was a bunch of Europeans posing as gods of Egypt. It's like every god of Egypt was a European in that movie. Really crazy, except Tahuti. They called him Thoth. And he was played by Chadwick Boseman, matter of fact. If y'all look at the characters that Chadwick Boseman played, it was always top-notch character. Whether he's playing a famous athlete, whether he's playing James Brown, whether he did Jackie Robinson, he did James Brown. He was Thoth or Tahuti in the Gods of Egypt, and of course he's T'Challa. He always was the epitome of whatever role he was playing. He was the highest manifestation of that. And so he played Tahuti or Thoth in the Gods of Egypt. He was the only African god in the Gods of Egypt, the only one that gave any type of major role to. And he says, there's a line, he says, I've been here since the beginning. So in other words, he's been there before all the European versions of the Egyptian gods showed up. And the part of the story they didn't really tell you was that once the Greeks and the Europeans invaded Egypt and took over, they did replace the African versions of the gods with the Europeanized versions of the gods. And so the African version was Tahuti. He'd been there since the beginning. He was also the record keeper. And there was one scene where he had like hundreds of himself just all around this library. And each one of them was like cataloging and making a record and filing away knowledge of all things. And so he was the eternal one that was still left of all the African gods, in other words. But that's also a part of your being. That's a part of us. So anything that you need to know, you can know. So it's like, if you have access to that wisdom, then you don't have to keep all the information in your head. You can just sit still and figure it out. I taught my son that. Because I handed him down my old car. And I told him all the little quirks about it. I said, okay, now this sunroof, sometimes it's going to get stuck. It's going to get stuck open. And I don't care how many times you hit that button, it ain't going to work. What you're going to have to do is meditate, visualize, and will it to happen. And I said, so one day it was stuck open and it was a storm coming. And I left him there. I said, here's your chance. And I went on in the house. That dude came in the house 2 minutes later with a little smirk on his face. I said, you got it? He said, I got it. He had to tap in to knowing how to move this thing. He didn't read nothing. He wasn't given any instruction, and he wasn't trying to force it. But somehow or another, tapped in, that thing closed. One of my experiences with it, I've been broke down so many times, and I used to ride hoopties like all the time. And I was at a train crossing. I was still in high school. At an old school 1979 Plymouth Boulevard. And I'm sitting at this train crossing. We've been sitting there. It's like 90-something degrees outside. Windows down. I may or may not have been intoxicated. I don't know. And we're sitting there, and the train is gone. And I hit the gas pedal, and it ain't moved. My transmission had went out as I was sitting there. So rather than panic, I threw that joint in reverse. It still worked in reverse. I drove backwards through the entire neighborhood. I was like down in Elmwood somewhere. You know the train crosses where you're going up the hill to the west side? So I was on one of them streets where the train blocked. And I had to throw that joint in reverse and drive through the neighborhood like the Bronx Tale, right? Wow. And I finally, I don't know where the gas station was. I don't know these side streets, but I ended up at a gas station to call somebody to come get me. All of that was the will. All of that was tapping into what to do next. It ain't got to be information like what's 2 times 2, but it can also be information on how do I fix this. So another time in Nashville, I had a Mercury Capri. It seemed to always be around cars too. Had a Mercury Capri. It was 510. And I had to change my power steering hose. And it was in a very tight spot. It's a pressurized hose. So, it's got the metal pipe in it. It's got the nuts on both sides. And one of them was way up under the engine. Trying for hours, couldn't get it. So then it was like, dude, go meditate. So I went in the house and I just sat still for a good 5-10 minutes, meditating, trying to visualize getting this thing off of there so I can replace this hose. Sat for a while, 5-10 minutes. Now I realized, okay, you got it. Went back out there, immediately came off. Right? That's the use of it. You tap in and knowing how to do something, whether you have the information or not. You get to the point of knowing that you know, and then you act as if you know what you know. Right? That's tapping into this part. Then we've got the shekel, which is words of power. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Because they're literally words that you can chant, that you can use to make things happen. And each part, let me say this, each energy has a particular vibration to it. And this is physics. That ain't nothing spooky, that ain't nothing, that's just what it is. Every energy has its own vibratory pattern to it. That's why you can have an opera singer who can hit a note and it'll shatter a glass. The vibration of her voice matched the vibration of this physical creation, and it intensified it so much that it couldn't hold its structure anymore. And that's why it shatters. It matched it, intensified it, shattered it. So there's systems of sound healing, for example, that exist around the world. People theorize that the pyramids were used using sound technology, right? To where if I had a bunch of sand right here, and if I had somebody pulled up and had 15s in the trunk, you turn and put on some old school Magic Mike, whoever dropping bass these days, boom, boom, you'll see the sand moving. And once it settles, there'd be a certain pattern in that sand that would match whatever the vibration was that was hitting the sand, right? And so that's what this part is about, is utilizing the words of power, the mantras, the hakao, to actually manipulate physical reality. I taught one of my students, I was teaching at Fisk, I taught all of them. I was teaching child and adolescent development at that time. And I was teaching the tree of life as a developmental process. You know, because we've got Erickson stages of development. We got all the European psychologists stages of development that we're required to teach. But I always make sure that we also teach African perspectives of it. So I taught them the tree of life as the African perspective. And we got to the eighth sphere, we'll talk about it, Sebek, which deals with the intellect, but it also deals with the opening of the way. So if you need access to something, it's the vibratory pattern of Sebek that you use to open the way. And so that's parking spaces, that's getting in the club, you know what I mean? Anything that you have to get into or get out of is this particular energy. And so it's all, again, intellectualism, all this stuff. So I taught them about that in class. And years later, one of my students sent me a message and said, "Hey, Doc," she was excited. She says, "I just passed my bar exam." You know, she became a practicing attorney. She went all the way back to the class in undergrad, and I taught them about Sebek, the opener of the way, you know, and how to tap into intellectualism and information and all that. She used what I taught them in that class to pass her bar exam. She attributed passing the bar exam to that particular energy and the word of power that relates with that particular aspect. She used it in her meditation, went to that bar exam, and knew all the information she needed to know to pass that test. Then we got Ed, corresponding to Mahu, we'll talk about that. Deals with interdependent-based insight. So that goes back to what I talked about with the birds. Some people come out there and don't even see the birds. You got some people see the birds and they're creeped out by the birds, right? You got other people that see the birds and understand that what there's a correlation between birds pecking on the ground and a storm coming. That's the interdependency of things. So you see one thing and you know that it relates to something else. It's never a question, does this relate to something else? It's what else does this relate to? You get out of your own way. You're no longer spending a whole lot of time trying to figure out, is there a relationship here? You know it's a relationship there. So you skip all of that part, because you can argue for days. There ain't no relationship there. This ain't no relationship. You go back and forth in your own head with other people. You skip that part. You know it's a relationship. Everything is related. So now your goal is to what? Figure out what's related. What does it relate to? How does this correspond? And then once you get that, boom, now you can act appropriately, because now you can see not only that there is a connection, you can see what it's connected to. And now you know you can manipulate this in order to get that. Or if this is showing up, then that's likely to also be either present right now or somewhere down the line. Y'all follow? You get here we go. You get the bubble guts. You know what I'm saying? You got the bubble guts. You know that might be related to something that you had to eat, or sometimes you're nervous about something, but we typically all know how the bubble guts end. If you don't intervene, bubble guts usually only lead to one of a few things. Interdependency. But before you knew what the bubble guts meant for you, you might get caught out there sometime. I can get no more graphic than that. But anyway, we'll talk about this stuff. A lot of this stuff, like I said, I've already talked about without using the language here. One of my things I love to do is make it as plain as possible, right? We can go 15-syllable words on all this stuff. We can talk in different languages and all that stuff, but my goal is, how are we going to get it? How are we going to understand it? How are we going to be able to lead from right here and make this jump off for us? The Sahu, again, this goes all the way down to bringing it forward. So it's like the last phase before bringing it into physical manifestation, right? It's the collection of all these other things, and then you channel it into this quote-unquote personality. And personality as a word relates to the Greek word, the concept of persona. And persona is a mask. It's the mask that you put on, right? It's to portray a certain type of energy, to portray a certain type of role. And so, depending on what happened in all those previous levels, is going to determine what type of persona you put forward. So that's Clark Kent. If you believe that you're only human, that you have these fragile limitations and stuff, then you're going to appear that way. But if you believe that you are divinely inspired, you are a divine being, then you're going to present that way. So that's all. It all culminates in what came before that, in a nutshell. We got these last two. We got the Kaidet, we got the Kev, the Ka. So this is, once you got all of that, it's literally the energetic representation of what's going to be physically manifested. Big words to just say that it's the version of you on a spiritual level that matches the version of you on the physical level. And some would even say that it's the reason why you physically manifest the way that you do, because of this energetic part. Stated another way, So we all have a physical heart. But nobody can know, I don't care how dope of a cardiovascular expert you are, how dope of a cardiologist you are, you cannot tell us where the first heartbeat comes from. You can talk about all the nerves, and how the nerves connected to the heart when you were still an embryo, all this stuff, and how the electrical impulse is what drives the heartbeat. But you can't tell me where that first electrical impulse came from. Well, it must have came from the parent. Where did theirs come from? You know, it shows that there is a unseen side of everything that's seen. We've got the sun in the sky that we can point to. According to these spiritual sciences, though, there's also a version of the sun that you can't see, but it's responsible for the version that we do see. This is the version of you that you can't see, that's using your eyes to see the world, but you can't use your eyes to see it. This is that part of you. That some say that once you shed your physical body, this is the part that people see in the shadow. You know, people wake up, I swore I saw my granddaddy last night. It must have been a dream. What if I woke when it happened? They would say that it was his kayak that showed up. The last part is your physical manifestation. Tree of life. Try not to do too much. No, I ain't gonna do it because I'm messing around and break something. Don't worry about it. I'm just gonna lower it a little bit. One thing we have up here is Amen. Amen is sphere number 0 in the Kemetic tradition. Ask Ron Nefer, Amen pointed it out. If you're looking in the Hebrew or the tree of life or the some call it the Kabbalah, Yetzer Sephirah, got Hebrew terms for it. But up there you have what's called Ayin is one of the words, Ayin Sof and Ayin Sof Don't worry about memorizing that. But those are like 3 levels of nothingness. And this part is going to be a little bit, wordy and stuff like that, but I'm just going to run us through it really quickly. And so imagine that there's a line right here dividing between 0 and 1. This will be considered the subjective realm, 0, which is above the line. And that's where you have the content or the potential for everything. But it's nothing. There's no thing there. But it's the potential for everything. So you've got what we consider consciousness and will, that consciousness, that awareness, and that ability to be awake, and that will, the ability to make happen what you want to make happen. And at the same time up there, you also have the potential for all energy and the potential for all things, all matter. All right, just roll with me for a second. And then from there, you come into the Osir, which represents the omnipresence of God. Meaning that it is that part of everything that's a part of everything. And that's how God is now omnipresent. Because there is something that is present in everything that exists. If we were talking chemistry or physics, we're talking about the subatomic particles. Electrons, protons, neutrons, right? You find that in every element. You got electrons, protons, and neutrons in every element that exists. And every element that exists is a part of everything else that exists. So that's one way that we can scientifically say, okay, I can understand omnipresence now. Let's say a hydrogen atom. You got hydrogen in all water, so no matter where you find water, hydrogen is there. Within a hydrogen atom, though, you have a proton, you have a neutron, you have an electron. And so an electron you can find in all of the elements. So that means that there's something that is everywhere that anything is. Y'all with me?
Yeah.
All right. Since you walked into the deep, we got our scuba gear on already, sis. Welcome.
Thank you.
So that's this part. And then you got Tahuti, which is the correlation with the omniscience of God that we talked about earlier. The ability to know everything. So Tahuti is that wisdom principle. Now, mind you now, these are all aspects of your spirit. So that means that you got the potential for all things coming from a place of no thing. Not only that, you got access to everything because whatever's in you is also in everything else. So now you're omnipresent. Boom, you got access to wisdom, the omniscience of God now. Which means there's nothing that you are incapable of knowing. Meaning that you can access knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of any and everything there is to be known. You have the limitation of your own cognitive ability to have command of that information, but you can definitely access it in the ways that you can, and you can apply it in the ways that you can. So it's like a librarian at the Library of Congress has not read everything in the Library of Congress, has not even seen it all. But guess what? They got access to everything in there. And so do we. We're in Cincinnati right now, which means that there is a gap between us being able to get from where we are to access it. So not only will we have to get to D.C., but then we have to get to the Library of Congress, then we got to get past the guard.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to that guard piece. But the only thing you need to get past the guard is a Library of Congress card. That's easy. You just apply for that joint. Now you got it. And if you apply for it as a researcher, you go through one way. If you're going in there as a tourist, you might not even need your card, and you go this way. But you can access it. And then once you get in there, now you got to know where everything is. But still, you have access to it. Even if you don't have it all right here, right now. Y'all follow that analogy? Mm-hmm. So if you need to know something, let's say if you're trying to figure out, I don't know, I need to figure out how to fix this shelf in my house that's wobbly and it's gonna fall down and I don't want to break what's on it. I can Google it. I can watch a YouTube video, right? I love the fact that people know how to do stuff and love to make videos of themselves showing other people how to do it. I mean, that was revolutionary. I remember when I was working on my Volare back in the day, I had to go to AutoZone and get one of them big old manuals. You know how they used to have the manuals of the cars and had a date on it? There's a Plymouth, 1976 through 1983. Okay, so now this is the book I need. And I go in that book and I flip to Volare, and now I got to find the particular problem I had. Nowadays, I just Google it, YouTube video, and it shows up for me, right? Mm-hmm. The game changer. So now we have access to it, just like that. We have access to it. Now I want to fix this shelf. So, okay, first of all, I got to feel like I can do it. Then I got to say, okay, not only can I do it, but first I got to say there are ways to do it. Then I can say, okay, I can do it. And then I figure out what needs to be done and have enough courage and confidence to what? Try it. Mm. And that can get you in trouble too, because I know plenty of people that got confidence and they're like, heck yeah, I can do that. And they end up messing up your stuff. They end up rigging it. Heck yeah, I can fix your car. You go in there and now your car is like, the only way it's going to work is you got to put a new piece of gray tape on it every day that you want to ride it. So that confidence in your ability to do something don't always match your understanding of what needs to be done. So you got to be careful with that. This is definitely a balancing act. But anyway, that's what that is. And then you've got Sekert, which is the omnipotent. It correlates with the omnipotent or the all-powerful aspect of God, which also correlates with what we talked about with the mantras, the words of power, knowing the vibratory essence of something. We're going to go too deep into that right now. We'll talk about some of the mantras later. But that's what this is, the ability to do the work. So you've got omnipresence, omniscient, and omnipotence. So then we start coming down here. Maya talks about the interdependency of things, how one thing always relates to other things. It's just about figuring out what that relationship is. And then we got the Heru aspect, which is, it deals with analysis, or analytical, or anabolic, anything that breaks stuff down. So this is holistic. It's seeing how the parts connect into a whole. This is breaking the whole down into parts, right? When these two operate together, you've got a very balanced way of perceiving reality. You can see the whole, you can see the forest and the trees that make up the forest, right? You see the whole forest as opposed to seeing individual trees. Heru is going to say, all right, so within this forest, we got a bunch of individual trees. It's focusing more on the individual trees. But when they're together, you don't get lost seeing individual trees and not the whole forest. Mm-hmm. When Ma'at is backed by Heruti, you're not lost in seeing it's one giant forest and you forget that it's individual trees in there. It's understanding the individual and the whole simultaneously when you got these two working together. So many levels to each one of these. We could spend 12 weeks working on just one of these and still not cover everything, all right? So just understand that too. This is in a nutshell. Number 6, or the Heru sphere, that's the part of your spirit that helps you with, we call it circumspection. Seeing things from as many angles as possible. So that helps you to be empathetic, to empathize with somebody. So if somebody is coming to the table with a perspective that's different than yours, you're less likely to feel some way about the difference in that, and you can actually hear what they're saying, because, wait a minute, okay, I can see how you see it. They see it from over here. You're able to come over here and be like, dang, I can see it from here too. You know, you're not so locked into your own way of seeing something that somebody else's perspective offends you because it feels like it's negating your own. You now understand that, no, this is just a different way of seeing the exact same thing. We come outside again. Bunch of birds pecking on the ground. I'm like, ugh, you ain't see them birds on the ground, what's wrong with you? Right? You know, ugh, you were scared of the birds on the ground, what's wrong with you? It ain't that. Ugh, how you thinking that birds on the ground represent rain coming? You know, we don't have an issue with the different ways of seeing the same thing that's being saw. We understand, like, yeah, you're right. There is a whole nother way to see this thing. It's not the way that I looked at. But if you are trained through meditation, remember, of expanding your consciousness about the various aspects of your spirit, if you've done the work on this level through meditation, then you've already seen it those other ways anyway. It's a holistic view that you have. You've seen it in as many ways as you are capable of seeing it in, which then helps you to understand what? The totality of the picture as much as possible. Y'all following?
Yeah.
Good. And if you ain't, it's okay. Please speak up if you don't. Like, for real, because that's what we're here for. And this is some heavy stuff. This ain't like lightweight. I acknowledge that. This is not lightweight. This is paradigm shifting. And this is the reason why many are called and few choose.
Yeah.
Because somebody else could have came in here and be like, man, been gone. Thought we was talking about meditating. I'm in here ready to, and we're doing all this instead. You got to be a special kind of sit through.
Right.
This is what it is. All right, I'm going to fast forward a little bit because now we're getting more into the practical part of it. When we start talking about the practical aspect of meditation, then we're actually going to start employing some of this in a minute. So then you come down here to the seventh sphere, Heteru. Heteru deals with creativity and, as far as meditation is concerned, visualization. Right? So you begin to be able to imagine or imaging, right? You put an image to your desire. So let's go back to that whole, the idea of painting a picture of a car. So you get the idea came from nowhere. It just came from, I don't know where the idea, I just woke up and had the idea, I want to paint a car today. You don't know where it came from. According to this, it came from the subjective realm. And then you begin to, of all of the possibilities and all of the things that go into a car, they start coming together. Slowly but surely, you add more, get more and more specific as you go. More and more specific as you go. Until you've got a clear image of what? The type of car that you plan to paint and manifest. And it's an image. You imagine this. You visualize this. Which becomes a tool that you can use going the other way. So now you've got this creative visualization tool as a part of meditation. On the path to manifestation. Then you come over here, and Sebek deals with the intellect or the information and also the verbalization, right? And in other ways, the words of power. So Sebek takes the energy of Sekhar. Remember we talked about the cow, the verbalization, the mantra, the words of power. You take those, it's the power behind the chants. It's the power behind the mantra. So, you know, one of the most famous mantras of meditation is Om. Right? You see people meditate Om. But there are so many other ones. In fact, they say that there are 50 matrices, meaning 50 sound units that can be combined in different ways to manifest different things for yourself. We're talking about it. We're going to get practical. And then from there, we got Oset, which are the different stages of consciousness, different levels of conscious awareness, the altered states of consciousness. So you got the dream state, like when you sleep, you dream, that's the state of consciousness. You got wide awake, you got substance-induced states of consciousness, like people who drink ayahuasca, they're able to travel, you know, ayahuasca trip, people who use LSD, people who use mushrooms, all these things alter your states of consciousness. You know, different teas, herbal teas will even do that. Different meditations using different vibrations will do that, right? Y'all remember on the movie, if y'all seen the movie Amistad, when they were on the slave ship, and right before they started rebelling, they was doing a particular song and dance on the deck. And, you know, the people, you know, the Europeans that was the enslavers, thought that they was just exercising and just singing a song. But they were singing a chant to bring forth the warrior spirit. They were bringing forth this fiery energy because they understood that they was getting ready to go ahead and take over the ship. And after they got the energy right and manifested their energy right, they started digging nails out of the ship, with their fingers. They showed like a scene where it's pulling up a nail out the ship. That's the altering, your persona, altering your state of consciousness. That was, remember, the personality persona part? You started altering that to be one that's warlike. That's got the fiery martial energy. Because you understand that what this situation calls for is martiality. It's fiery, it's fearlessness, it's warrior. So let me call upon the warrior aspect of my spirit because I'm going into war right now. How do we do it nowadays? We turn on the most gangster rap that we can. We smoking, we drinking, we polishing the guns, we getting ready to ride on these fools. We doing the same thing. We calling on the martial energy, the warrior energy, because we going into battle right now. Football players in the locker room, they're getting hyped, they get we ready, whatever the chant is, they take it on that persona. Right? If we about to go and do that thing right there, doing the nasty, we call them the sensuality. We put on the slow jams, we get the wine, we get something sweet, we get the chocolates, taking them out for dinner, we smell good, we look good, we're gonna taste good, right? We start to flip our persona, we flip our personality to match whatever it is that we need to do. Y'all follow me?
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned different states of consciousness.
Yep.
Would that be considered like different? I'm trying to figure out how to say it. An offset, would it be like this is one offset, this is another offset?
Very interesting. So yes, that is a possibility. So there are different types of offset. So not only does offset represent the personality itself, but offset carries its own energy too. So let me talk about the energy of offset. Offset deals with motherliness, nurturing, also deals with teachers, deals with altered states of consciousness. Anything that's a nurturing type of vibe is an offset energy. And so there are many roads to offset. If we talked about it in Nigeria for the Yoruba people, it's Yemaya. And there are different roads to Yemaya. So you got offset that might be a doula or a midwife, somebody who delivers babies, an obstetrician, a gynecologist obstetrician, somebody who deals with reproductive health. That's one path of offset. Then you got another offset who is a teacher of young children. Then you got another type of offset that would be a nurturer, somebody who might work at retirement communities or in healthcare, a nurse, for example. So you've got all these different aspects of offset, but at its core, it still deals with some type of nurturance, some type of life-affirming type of energy. So yes, it can be this type of offset, that type of offset, but on the other level, you have different personalities that are also different ways to manifest through offset, whether it be the nurturing type offset itself or the fiery type coming through the personality. You follow what I'm saying?
Yes. So one of the things that I was kind of gearing towards was, you know how they talk about different states of consciousness, like delta?
Mm-hmm. Alpha brain waves, beta, gamma, yep.
Yeah, because I know you mentioned with the offset being a certain consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that kind of made me think of is like with all this regulation and legalization now in the States.
Marijuana?
Yeah. So how they have like, you have like Delta 8 is legal, but I guess like the Delta 9 state is illegal or something like that.
Okay, so yeah, you're making a very, very, very interesting correlation, using, the Delta language and, and you're saying that the Delta state, Delta 8 is legal, but Delta 9 is not, or however that goes, right? And so, very interesting and profound. So those different strains or different configurations of the chemical, the mind-altering chemical, it does produce a different type of conscious state, right? And you're saying it from the way of this particular one is legal and this is not. But you said it in the way of this type of consciousness is legal, this type is not. Which is a very profound way to say it, because what they're talking about is this chemical is legal and this chemical is not. But it is because of the consciousness it produces on the other side. Now, the other part of this whole marijuana conversation is that now, by making it legal, more people are having access to it And so that means that more people are going to be functioning in the world with an altered state of consciousness now. Now, what this chemically induced altered state of consciousness now does is it also makes people more susceptible or receptive to being manipulated into behaving a certain way. So you have a chemically induced altered state of consciousness that may make you more likely to be influenced to behave a certain way. Good or bad, whichever. It just depends on who understands that that's the state of the people now. And remember I talked about earlier that our taste and our desires are being given to us through the marketing and the advertisement. So now you're more receptive to certain marketing. And all marketing doesn't come as a commercial. Some marketing comes as a repeated personality showing up being rewarded. So if I show you this thugged out dude, enough, and you feel like that's rewarded, then you're going to want to grow up and be just like that person. And if they're talking about killing and murdering and all this other type of stuff, then that's what you feel like you want to do because it's rewarding, right? So I say all that to say that that's a very interesting way to present it. And yes, altered states of consciousness, it fits right here in this sphere. Even substance-induced altered states of consciousness. In fact, Ron Neframir talks about how marijuana is it induces femininity. And so it literally makes one more feminine, meaning more receptive, more docile, more submissive, right, on the receiving end of things. And so if you have a large population of men that are constantly intoxicated with marijuana, then the masculine aspect of themselves is also diminishing in direct relationship to their consumption of marijuana. Yeah, something else.
It made me think of how if, I guess like government can distribute like a substance that can induce delta 8, however it's judged, delta 8 level of consciousness. It made me think like how to reach like delta 9, like, or what is delta 9? Are we in delta 9?
So again, when they say delta 8 and delta 9, they're talking about a configuration of a chemical, right? And so they're not talking about consciousness. And so when you first mentioned like delta, I was thinking that you were talking about the brainwave patterns. You got alpha state, you got alpha brainwave pattern, you got beta brainwave pattern, you got gamma, you got delta, right? And you can see all these when we're talking about consciousness as it relates to wakefulness. Then you have the reason why alpha brainwaves are called alpha brainwaves is because it was the first that was discovered. And they discovered it, in people who were not at the height of their wakefulness. They were actually experiencing a state of consciousness that was a step beneath ultimate wakefulness. But it's called alpha because it's the first. Beta is actually higher brain activity than alpha is. But this is what I thought you was going with it. And so you got beta, then you have alpha, and I believe it's gamma, then it's delta. And if you look at any type of sleep studies, or when you go into the psychological literature and it's talking about brainwave activity, you will see that the deeper you are in a sleep, the less brainwave activity you have, meaning the less awareness the less awakeness you have, meaning the less. So we have awakeness, so it's like you can be asleep, the more likely you are to be sleeping approaching death, being no brain activity at all. But at the same time, you can be in alpha state and have a heightened sense of awareness, which is one of the goals of meditation, is to have you in a more relaxed and a less stimulated state of brain activity, but to also have an increased level of awareness of what's going on around you as well as within you. That's where I thought you were going. And some people will use different strains of marijuana, so, for example, to reach heightened states of awareness, higher states of consciousness, while decreasing their awakeness. So when you have like people, for example, who can induce alpha state for themselves without the use of drugs, there's certain breathing patterns, and we'll get into that in just a minute. There are certain breathing patterns that are designed and certain sounds that are designed to manipulate your brain wave activity to put you into an alpha state, which means that you can be relaxed and aware of what's happening. Remember the story I told about like the bank robbery in the beginning? Everybody going crazy. The first shot that they put in the air is to heighten everybody's awareness. All right, y'all, pay attention. It's to get your attention. And it's also to get you nervous and emotional. But the person who is trained in meditating they can stay in alpha state regardless of what's happening around them. And that's why they're able to move slow and think and still plan and plot how they're going to get out of this situation alive. And maybe how they could even take over the person that's intending to rob. Some people, so if you were in that situation and you were in a delta state, you probably wouldn't be able to function. Because delta is typically associated with being asleep, in a very deep sleep. And so if you are awake, but your brain is in a very deep sleep state, then you're not likely to be able to do anything that's going to physically engage your environment. Which is why some people who are high a lot and high all the time, they can have ideas, they can be creative. Good luck getting them to get up and do anything though. And then even the different strains of marijuana now, you got the sativa side and you got the indica side. And sativa is more the serious, that's the strain, those are the strains that help you to be, thinking and functioning, you know what I mean? It's not the kind of high that have you just kind of sluggish. But the other one, indica, people literally call it in the couch. Because they call it a body high, to where you don't feel energetic to do anything. And that's the part that is helpful in a way for those people who need to rest. Some people use medical marijuana to rest, to deal with pain. Remember I talked about how pain can distract us from being able to do other things? So some people use those strains to get rid of the pain, to avoid, whatever physical ailment that might be impeding upon them being able to do anything else, including sleep, right? And so, but to induce delta upon masses of people, you're actually more likely to keep those people from being able to function in any type of beneficial way to themselves or society at all. But
So maybe later after class we can talk, because I'm very fascinated by who came up with this Delta 8 and then going into Delta 9 and beyond, like these altered states of consciousness.
so again, Delta 8 and Delta 9 are talking about chemical configurations, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Okay.
So they're talking, it was a chemist that came up with it. A chemist that understood it. This configuration of these chemicals produces this type of outcome. And if we do this to take it from 8 to 9 configuration, it has this effect on people. So it was just a chemist in a lab. That's an easy answer. Why? It's because when you're talking about defense, because now we're talking about national defense, and the manipulation of chemicals to manipulate people's consciousness is a weapon. And it's a knowledge that's necessary for any organization on this planet that's interested in winning wars and not losing wars. And this chemical warfare is very real. In fact, there's a whole branch of warfare that talks about the use of chemicals. Not only chemicals to burn, like on the outside, like, Agent Orange and, mustard gas and all that stuff, but also chemicals that you can, like, there was a fear that you can destroy or neutralize an entire city by putting a few drops of LSD in the water supply. And so they need to say, okay, so what are these chemicals that you can put in a civilization's water supply that can literally neutralize the entire people, right? And so then they started figuring out what are these different chemicals, what are the different ways that you can introduce the chemicals to people, and what would be the outcome of people consuming these chemicals. So if you got a population that's lulled to sleep, is walking around like zombies, you don't have to worry about them being able to protect and defend themselves. But if you can also give a chemical that alters your consciousness to where you're more receptive to information, meaning, so we call these like the focus enhancing drugs. So you can give some people a certain drug, Adderall, for example. It helps people to focus. They may have ADHD, but at the same time, people who don't have ADHD can take certain amounts of this drug and increase their ability to focus. Now they're studying for exams, and they pass them with flying colors. But they did it chemically induced. They shifted their consciousness not to bring them up from a deficit, but to enhance themselves. So it was a chemist in the laboratory, to answer your question directly, that came up with the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9, for whatever reason they did. I would say it was likely for defense purposes. However it manifested itself. So we can talk later, but that's not my area of expertise. So if you talk to me about the difference between Delta 8 and Delta 9, we ain't gonna get nowhere other than my understanding of what it's about for real. But the details of it, I don't have nothing for you. Anybody, anything else? All right, so then we go from there. So you've got the creative visualization, you've got the information of the mantra, and then you've got the the emotional state of the state of consciousness is being altered. And then you got Ged, which is level 10, which is literally the physical manifestation, but it also relates to the physical state of your being and how you can manipulate the physical state of your being in order to enhance your meditative experience. And what we do is we manipulate breathing. It's the number one thing you manipulate is your breath, the rate of breathing, the depth of your breathing, in order to manipulate your entire meditative experience and to enhance your ability to get the most, maximize your experience from meditation. The other thing that you can do is what we've been talking about, the chemicals. There's also a physical manifestation that manipulates the physical chemistry in your body, which then impacts your ability to visualize, the quality and depth of your visualization, the use of your mantras or the words of power, as well as your emotional state and all those other things.
That's the reason they call alcohol liquid courage.
Liquid courage. And why they also call it spirits.
Yeah.
You ever wonder why they call alcohol spirits?
Be possessed.
Yeah, because it alters and it impacts the division of your spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also why in any type of ritual, not any, but many of the rituals, you have alcohol as a part of it, whether you're pouring libation with it, you're skewing your shrines with it, but it's also spirits, it's alcohol that we use every time. And water as well. Yes.
Kind of tying into that, one thing that I noticed is like if you take a glass of like, so because you know how people like to mix alcohol with like juice or different things like that. If you take the alcohol and you mix it with like some cranberry juice or something, you can see like these like waves. It changes, like you kind of see it, and it kind of made me think of the example that you gave of the cymatics, of how like if you put a strong enough vibration onto something, you change the configuration of the way that it presents itself. So it kind of made me think of that when we talk about spirits. If you take alcohol and put it inside of another liquid, you can see that you can actually, when you look at it, you can see like this is like it's like a waviness to it.
It's kind of like if you got like water with oil in it, or like you can see like, yeah, because it's just the densities are different. That's probably what you're actually seeing. You're seeing the fact that they haven't combined into one substance, so it's the separation of the two things that's still visible. Yep. Let's move forward. So as I mentioned, there are three basic aspects of meditation. Now we get into the practical stuff, right? We did all that just to say that there are three aspects of meditation.
We have to have the background part.
We have to break it down.
I think, if we want to maximize the practice of it, it's good to at least know that there's more to it.
Yeah.
And that's I ain't trying to stop you from keep going, but I'm saying like as far as like manifesting, part of our reality is like using that to a manifestation, which I'm trying to doing my best to perfect. I haven't perfected yet, you know what I mean? But I have manifested some things in my life. I'm like, okay, do work. It's about meditation as well, like your thoughts, breathing, and then also putting the energy behind your thoughts to manifest it. Because like you said, you gotta be smoking all day, bringing ideas, but don't want to put the energy behind it to create it. Right. You know what I mean? But I was just saying that all this plays a part into manifestation. To me, I think meditation and manifestation is one and one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's meditation is a tool to manifestation. Yeah, you can manifest without meditating too, but it is a very powerful tool for manifesting. And part of the reason is because you're now focusing your energy. You're now focusing your process, and you are employing tools toward a particular end. And that end is the manifestation of what it is that you want and desire. And so through meditation, you're literally consolidating your resources. You're pulling your resources together. So he said, I will manipulate my physical energy. And the one thing about breathing that's really profound to me is that it's an automatic process. You don't have to think about breathing to breathe. It's going to happen automatically. But you can also think about breathing and manipulate your own breathing. All right? So everybody take a deep breath, because most of y'all hold your breath. That breath right there probably felt different from most breaths that you've taken all day today. It should have felt relaxing to a degree. It's like, hey, okay, And so imagine doing that intentionally, and we're going to do it in just a little bit, but doing that intentionally with the purpose of, I'm going into meditation to manifest a particular outcome for myself. Whether it's simply relaxation, or if it's, you want to energize yourself and get more energy because you're about to go into the boxing ring or the MMA octagon, or if you are on another flip, if you are literally about to engage into some type of intimacy and you want to be able to last longer, dudes, you can have a rate of breathing for that. All of this is all a part of the same thing. So you manipulate your breathing to manipulate your life force. And when we do the yoga and qigong class, we're going to really get into this breathing and show how the different postures of yoga are designed, when coupled with the breathing, are designed to send the energy through your body in certain ways. So a particular pose only changes the channels of energy in your body. We have nervous system, circulatory system. My nervous system is configured one way when I'm doing this. It's configured another way when I'm doing this, right? It's just because my body changed. And my nervous system is a part of my physical body. So if I twist myself this way, now my nervous system is also twisted this way. If I do it this way, now it's twisted that way. That's the difference. And when I'm like this, taking deep breaths, as compared to when I'm standing like this, taking deep breaths, as compared to if I'm doing downward facing dog, taking deep breaths, it's a difference in how that breath is coming in and out of my body, which then means that it's moving the energy of my body in a different way. We'll save that for the yoga and qigong class. But all of this is built upon each other. So that's the breathing part. Different rates of breathing brings about different experiences, right? Jay-Z said, great philosopher Jay-Z, also known as Sean Carter, he says, I don't want to waste my breath because I don't know how many more I got left. And when I heard that line, I said, wow, that's profound, because that's an ancient philosophy that says that you are born with the allotment of only a certain number of breaths. And when you get to that number, you're done. Whether it takes you 500 years to get to that number, or if it takes you 3 weeks to get to that number. However many you come here allotted with, is all you got. And so consciously and intentionally breathing, you slow down your rate of breathing. In other words, you slow down the number of breaths that you take in a minute, which means that you get more minutes to live if this philosophy is in fact true. And so there are certain rates of breathing that I teach to where you can get your breathing down to 3 breaths in a minute. You can manipulate it to be 4 breaths a minute, right? You can manipulate it to be 2 breaths in a minute. All of these things are possible. And that's what meditation does for you. It allows you to intentionally and conscientiously change your rate of breathing. When you change your rate of breathing, you also change your rate of energy consumption. All fire needs oxygen to burn, right? Your energy system is a version of fire. The way you breathe either intensifies your fire or it dissipates your fire, right? That's why breath control is so important when it comes to manifestation or meditation, right? We'll get the experience of it in just a minute. The next one is the verbal thinking. Mantra, as I was taught, means it's like mind protector. And so when you're doing things like praying, doing things like spiritual work, you want to be very, very protective of what you allow to be occupying your mind during that time. Because if I'm increasing my energy, my life force energy, with the intention of applying it to an outcome, if I allow my mind to be occupied with, oh man, the bills are due, oh man, they're coming to argue. If I allow my mind to be occupied with negative things, then the energy that I'm raising up is going to be applied to those negative things. Mm-hmm. And so I want to occupy my mind with something that's going to literally protect me from using my energy towards something I don't want it to be used for. So that's why, you got the rosary beads. Each bead is a Hail Mary or Our Father. Or if you're Muslim, you got the prayer beads. Each one's a Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, whatever it is. But it's to occupy the verbal part of your brain. So if I'm sitting here saying Hail Marys or praying Our Fathers, then my mind can't also be saying, I can't stand them, right? Because I've given it what it's going to have. I occupy my verbal mind, my thinking mind, with what I want it to have, rather than risking it, wandering off and dealing with stuff that's not going to be beneficial to me, or that could be wasteful in the moment. That's why people have a prayer closet. You go in your prayer closet because you're not distracted by the outside world anymore. You put yourself in a space to where you're less likely to be engaged with the things that you're trying to get away from. And that's what mantra does. It occupies your thinking mind. Some say that your thinking mind is like a monkey. It's all over the place. It's going to be distracted. It's going to be all these things. So you need to give it something to focus on in order to maximize the practice of meditation. And so some people, you'll give it a mantra, I am that I am. Or you give it affirmations. This is going to be the best and most beautiful day of my life. This is guaranteed. I will work towards it. This is going to be the best and most beautiful day of my life. I guarantee it, and I will work towards it. All things are going towards my greater and highest good. All things are going towards my greatest and higher good. By you repeating that in your mind, you're now keeping your mind from thinking anything else. So now your mind can wander off and say, damn, is that a roach crawling on me? Man, damn, I'm hungry tomorrow. Or, man, I shouldn't have ate them chilies. You know, it keeps your mind from doing all that stuff. It gives it what it's going to think. You cannot verbally think two things at the same damn time. You might be able to get close to doing it, and some people can train themselves to do it. But the average person, it ain't going to happen. So you give your mind what you want it to think to protect your mind from wandering off and thinking the things that you're trying to get away from. Y'all follow? Mm-hmm. That's the second part. Then the third one is your visualization, your visual thinking. You've got a left brain and you've got a right brain. The right is more creative and more visually based. The left is more verbally and literally based. And so you occupy it with that so that you can occupy it with something, a placeholder, just to keep you from wandering off, or you can give it something specifically to think about that matches what you're visualizing. And so just like you can visualize bad and negative things, and so much of social media is predicated upon feeding us negative imagery. Like, I can't tell you how many fight videos I watch. You know, and I just do it. It's like it's one of those guilty pleasures I take. I join fight groups on Facebook just to, you know, just to have something. I like to watch people get knocked out. But part of the psychologist in me, I'm literally working with some engineers right now for predictive behaviors. And so how can you predict violence? And one thing that they've noticed is that if you want to see who's going to throw the first punch, you know, it's the person that does this. If you see somebody in an encounter and they adjust their pants, they pull their pants up like that, they're likely to get ready to throw a punch. So just know that. So if you argue with somebody and they do like this, know a punch is coming. Bank on it. Bank on it. You might be wrong, but you want to err on the side of caution because they're likely to throw the first punch. The person that adjusts their pants likely to throw that punch. Right? So I mean, I watch it for various reasons. Some of it's I just like, dang, you know, just watching, just to watch it. But anyway, having negative imagery in an unprotected state or an ignorant state, it leads you to likely manifest negative things for yourself down the road. So you got people who worry about stuff all the time, and they always expect the worst, and they can even see it. They have these ruminating, not only verbal thoughts, but ruminating visual thoughts, and all of that. Because you, believe it or not, you're always in a quote-unquote meditative state. Always. You're always in some type of state of consciousness. You're always in the process of manifesting your life, whether you're intentionally doing it or not. So this is an intentional way of taking control of that powerful experience that we as human beings have and doing it to our greatest and highest good, no longer at the will of whoever and whatever else is using us like human batteries. Hashtag the Matrix. Because that's the part of that movie that was telling you, like, no, you are a human battery for some type of machine. And as long as you're plugged in, believing that you're living your life for free, it's got you. But the moment that you get unplugged, and you're like, whoa, wait a minute, you mean to tell me that I can use those same energies and those same tools that the machine had me plugged into for my own manifestations? Until you do that, you're there. But the minute that you do that, now you're in control of your life. And don't be one of them folks that can move in and out of the matrix now. Because that was a whole other level of existence, right? Mm-hmm. You had people that were stuck in the matrix. You had people who had never been in the matrix. And then you had people that could move in and out of both worlds. Those were the superior ones. The people who had never been in the matrix, they were free. It was always free. It was Tank and Dozier. He said, a good old-fashioned son of Zion right here. Never been in the matrix. He didn't have no plugs. Mm-hmm. But he also couldn't go in. So he could never even see and experience all the things you can do as a conscious being in the matrix. Flying around, running up walls, you know, take a motorcycle, flip it into a whole, you know, place and boom, explosion and dodging bullets. They never had that experience. But as one that can go in and out of the consciousness, in and out of the matrix, you know, in and out of this whole totally contrived world, you know, if you're one of those people, you're a superior person, right? One who can go in and out of meditation. One who can go in and out of the system. You can go in and use the system for your own benefit, right? That's a whole other level of being. But that's what meditation affords you. It teaches you how to reclaim your consciousness, reclaim your own will, right? And it gives you the tools to manipulate it as you see fit. With me? Back to stroke recovery. You know, you're told that if you have this, you cannot back. Once the brain has received damage, that's done. You know, now they got this whole thing of epigenetics, or you got neurogenesis, to where it's talking about how now neurons can, in fact, renew themselves. But the other part is that neural pathways, there's many ways to get from A to B. Now, we're used to it taking this particular pathway. Typically, if for all your life you picked up something using this particular neural pathway, and when that neural pathway is damaged, now you just have to retrain yourself to pick it up some other kind of way. So your neurons, your brain can make connections, and it might take a while to go around the damaged part, but you can still reconnect and make new connections. In fact, everything that you experience new, that you experience for the first time, creates new connections in your brain. It does. You might have to get it over and over again, but you create new pathways by having new experiences. The first time you smell chocolate, whoa, it set off new connections in your brain. The more you smell chocolate, the more, and smell chocolate with similar experiences, the more stable those connections become, right? The more firm those patterns become in your brain, the neural connection, right? It reinforces it, right? But if you begin to smell it and have different experiences, now you make it do connections, right? So the brain is, we call it plasticity or elasticity, meaning that it's flexible. It's not concrete. It's not as concrete as people thought that it was. Meditation gives you those opportunities, right? Especially when you can control your visualization, control the verbal thinking, and control your rate of breathing, which manipulates your energetics, your body energy, the vitality of it. Let's look at this. We added the verbal parts. One thing that our ancestors, they left us the cues for everything that we need to know now. What you see in this is King Tutankhamun, right? Or we can call it King Tut or King Tutankhamun. It's Tutankhamun or Amen. So he was king, eternal king with peaceful life force, a stable life force. This is so. Look, his face is very serene, right? But the point here is the serpent and the vulture on his crown, and they're both here at the site of the third eye. You know, if you go straight back, it's thought that that's where his pineal gland. They line up with the pineal gland. And when you see, I think they call it like duodenum or something like that, you'll see that they actually traverse the brain, and it shows like the two hemispheres. And you've got this bundle of nerves called the corpus callosum that combines your left brain with your right brain. So then you have what we call dual hemispheric functioning, right? It means that your left brain and your right brain are both working to perceive and to engage with the world. You have some people who are born with the dominance of their left brain. They're typically more literal, more logical, more linear, more concrete. You got another group of people that may be dominated by right brain. They can be more creative, more flexible, and they might paint a picture with words all the time instead of getting straight. So when you ever talk to somebody, you just ask them a simple question like, man, how do I get to the store? And you're like, just tell me which turns. Okay, so you're gonna see this big old house. It's beautiful. It's got lemon trees in the garden. Got a white picket fence. They got bird feeders. There's always this beautiful dog in the yard. Well, not that corner. 3 corners past that house where you're gonna see a gas station. There's gonna be a dude out there all the time. They gotta give you all of this stuff just to get to the simple point, right? That's more right brain creativity. But when you have dual hemispheric, you got both of those. You got access to both. And you're perceiving things. Remember that whole Heru piece. You perceive things. You perceive the whole. And so if I'm talking to a person that needs to hear it more succinctly, I can pull that out. If I'm talking to a person that needs the imagery because they're looking for landmarks and they love the beauty of the journey, I can give it to them the way that they do. Because if I'm too direct with this type of person, they're gonna receive it as maybe rude. I didn't really like the way he was talking because it just felt too pushy, too forceful. It was just direct. It didn't come with all the fluff and all of the exchange and the massaging of reality. It was just like, boom, boom. You're going to go 2 miles east, and on the north side of the street is where you're going to find it. You're like, east, north? I don't know these directions like that. They got you compass oriented. Like, it's on the north side of the street, and it's the third house from the midpoint of the block. You're like, the heck is all of this? What color is the house, right? Is there a gas station? Are there trees over there? You want the more visual. Those are the 2 different hemispheres of the brain. And so what you have here is an indication that they have awakened both hemispheres of the brain, and that they're functioning dual hemispheric, which is a very elevated and enlightened way of being. It not only means that, but it also means that they have mastered both the masculine and the feminine aspects of their nature. Not only that, but it's also saying that they have mastered electricity and magnetism. So they have the electromagnetism as and within their toolkit too. There's so many layers to this thing. And the way that they did it was that they were able to raise their consciousness to that level. Remember the different divisions of the spirit? They were able to master all those different aspects of their spirit. So a king or a ruler at that time wasn't just somebody who had political power. They had spiritual power. That's why I was saying that the religious leaders were real initiates. The real medical doctors were initiates. The real babysitters were initiates. You didn't have to worry about certain things, right? Because they were elevated in their consciousness. Stated another way. Again, the same thing. You got the serpent, and you got the vulture. It's the same thing. And you've got the right eye. Because there's also a left eye. You got the Uchat Eabit and Uchat Eaku, to the left and the right eyes of Heru, or Ra. And what this is indicating, because it's the right eye, is the ability to psychically influence things. The left eye is the more, which is electric, it's the more masculine. The left eye is the receptive feminine part, meaning the ability to not only gain insight, but to also be influenced by things, right? To draw things to yourself, to go internal as opposed to external.
Could you say those names again?
Ucha Eaku and Ucha Eabit, but Ucha is the eye. It's what helps us to understand. Remember I talked about the interdependency piece? So what does this whole thing look like to you? Tree and lungs, all at the same time, right? Mm-hmm. And the relationship between the human being and nature, or trees, we breathe out what the trees breathe in, and the trees breathe out what we breathe in. True fact, right? Right. They breathe out oxygen, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out carbon dioxide, they breathe in carbon dioxide. And the branches of the tree looks just like the bronchi in your lungs, right? The different tubes in your lungs are designed just like the different branches of a tree. You got the sacs at the end of the tube just like they got the leaves. Ain't that profound? No. That's the interdependency and the interrelatedness between all things. And it shows itself if you have a high enough level of awareness to actually see it. It's a pretty deep game. Now check this out. All the trees are dropping their leaves right now. I got this saying that it's always better to choose than to be forced. Right? So you can choose to sit down or you're going to be forced to sit down. One way that it's always better to choose because you don't want to be forced because force costs sometimes. Choosing even costs. But at least you get to decide what it's going to cost you. Mm-hmm. When you're forced, you got to take what you got. And so if the trees didn't drop their leaves right now, they would die. Because the water in the fluid being out here in the extremities like that would freeze when the weather drops. So they got to get rid of that. So they drop the leaves and they retract all the resources back down into the bark and into the trunk and into the roots of the plant. It consolidates its energy. And then when it's time for the spring, when the weather starts warming up again, it sends those resources back out into the branches of the tree to start anew. It has to follow the cycle in order to survive. We follow the same cycles. If you look at the, you gave them the handouts with the days of the week with the foods. Mm-hmm. So that talks about the cycles. Every day has its new cycle. Every week is a new cycle. Every month is a new cycle. Every year is a new cycle, right? All these are cycles. And the more you know about the cycles, and you can apply these different tools, such as meditation, for these cycles, then the more likely you are to be in sync and in line with life, and to live a more better, more fulfilled and abundant life. So right now we're coming upon the winter solstice, for example. It's a very auspicious time for us to sow the seeds of what we want to experience for the next year. Right? They tell us that we got New Year's resolutions. We do that on December 31st, right? Going into the new year. No, in between, throwing shots back and all that stuff. And people wonder why New Year's resolutions don't often work. It's because we missed the window in the cycle for really applying what it is that we want for our life for the next year. It should be at the winter solstice. We don't know that, so we're caught up in the consumerism of the holiday season. And so we sow seeds of consumerism and debt into the next year to come. Many people do that. And it's because we don't understand the correlations in the science. We'll be done in just a second.
Take your time, bro.
So I know we want the practical stuff. I was looking at this, I was meditating on this symbol right here. This ancient Egyptian symbol. You've got Shu, which deals with the air or atmosphere. You got Geb, which deals with the physical manifestation of the earth. And then you got Tefnut, which is the heavens, right? And there's a story that goes with this. It talks about how the heavens and the earth were separated by the atmosphere. So if I look at the physical earth itself, then we have this atmosphere around the earth, and we have the heavens beyond it. And they were separated. They were lovers. They were connected, and they were separated by Shu. And I was looking at this one day in the context of meditation. I was like, wait a minute. This is actually a scientific formula on how to reunite heaven with earth. And the way you do it is by controlling the air. That separates it, controlling your breathing. And so in order to reunite your higher and your lower selves, the spiritual and the physical aspect of you, you control the breathing, you control Shu, you control that which is separating the two in order to reunite the two. So I ran that past a few of my elders that are very deep off into understanding the spiritual sciences and stuff, and they had never thought of it that way either, but it makes absolute sense because it is the reality. Through meditation, through certain breathing techniques, you're able to, remember, access those higher parts of the tree of life, the omniscience, the omnipresence, and the omnipotence. You're able to access that and to connect it with your ability to physically manifest things. And it's through meditation of breathing. And these are just some more symbols that talk about the ability to raise energy from the lower parts of yourself to the higher parts. This is a Jed pillar. And in some respects, the Jed represents the spinal column. Right? And that's the main channel for your energy circuit or your nervous system, which is an electrochemical system. Meaning that you have the neurotransmitters, which are chemicals, and you have the electricity that runs everything in your body. It's why in the Matrix, people were plugged in. It's one scene in the first Matrix that talks about how many BTUs, or biothermal units, a human body gives off. So it gives off heat energy. That's why you naturally have energy. You're warm. And when they try to see if somebody's dead, they cold to the touch. Because that energy, the ability to generate heat has dissipated, it's gone. And then also, the electricity can be used and tapped into to run things as well. And so this is the Jed pillar that represents stability, amongst other things. So that's this part of it. So then I'm going to teach, we'll go through a couple of actual practical techniques on how to apply meditation. All right, so we could take a couple of minutes of a break. We're going to use bathroom, get y'all some water or whatever, and then we'll come back together and actually go through some of the practical application of meditation. Any questions, anything right now? Thoughts about anything? You want to say something?
Yeah, when you mentioned about the spine, I was reading about the spine last night, and I didn't realize how important, well, I know the spine is important, but just as the brain, everything's connected to the spine. So when people are having surgeries on their spine, something else is diminished to their physical ability to do things. To me, that was profound, and the fact that you said that now, I'm like, wow, this means something to me. Not quite sure what, but it was just profound to me how, because we don't, well, at least I haven't thought about the spine being as, I know the spine is used for walking, for standing. People have spine injuries. They can't manipulate the rest of the body sometimes. We have a friend, a mutual friend, who's had spine issues. And
Nashville? Okay, yeah.
And he has, can't walk because of that. He had surgery. But it's just very, to me, how important the spine is, just as important as the brain is, and all of that is connected to, I think, to the higher self and to, meditation and those things like that. And we don't put enough emphasis on the importance of the spine.
And so one thing that I point out is that the spine is literally the bone structure that houses the spinal cord.
Right.
And so there are two things there. One is the spine itself, which are the bones, and that's that column. And the importance of that is that it houses and protects the spinal cord, which is the part of the central nervous system,
Right.
which is directly connected to the brain. It's like literally the brain sits on top of the spine, right? And you know, you got the what they call it, blocking. There's I'm blocking it, and I can hear Dr. Africa's voice right now talking about it. But you got the brain stem is what connects the brain to the spine, right? And then they connect, and the cranial nerves. That ain't the word I was looking for. But anyway, so that's the brain connects to the rest of the body through the spinal cord. The majority of the nerves that come from the brain to the rest of the body pass through the spinal cord, which is why it's so important. Which is why when people have spine injuries, they often also have spinal cord injuries, which is nerve damage. And it's through the nerve damage that impedes their ability to function.
Yes.
Because the nerves the nervous system is a system of communication. It communicates from the brain to the rest of the body.
Right.
And so if you have a disruption in that communication, it's like having a bad cell phone signal. You don't get the words across.
Right.
If I'm talking to you and you're trying to tell me how to get here, and every 2 seconds it goes dead or it's staticky, that's just like me trying to tell my hand how to reach down and grab this bottle of water, and the communication is disrupted, and I can't get my arm to extend, my body to bend, and my fingers to close around. And I might even have issues with depth perception. If the injury is in the optical nerve or with the occipital lobe, then I can't even see how far away the bottle actually is.
Right.
And that's why when some people have certain strokes, depending on where it is, if you have a stroke in the occipital lobe, now you're dealing with the vision. You know, not division, but vision, right? The ability to see, a part of which is depth perception. And so some people have issues with gait walking because they can't discern the distance between the foot being raised up and how far the ground is. You ever been walking down steps, y'all, and you thought it was another step?
Yeah.
And you step down, and it hurts sometimes, but it just feels really weird because you was expecting, your body was anticipating and even functioning as if there were more distance between your foot and the ground. And that ground came quicker than what you thought it would, and it threw everything off, right? Sometimes to the point of falling. So imagine that same issue with the depth perception. You're trying to reach for this bag, and you can't tell how far away it is. Ordinarily, though, it's nothing to it. You reach it, you close your hand right on time for some reason. That's the depth perception part of it. And so that's what you're talking about is the communication system of the body being compromised through injury. And through that injury, it can throw everything off. There's a scene in the movie Kill Bill. I don't know if it was 1 or 2. I think it's 2. I don't know which one it is. But it's when Uma Thurman's character, she's been in a coma. You know, that's one of the main stories of Kill Bill is that she was an assassin, and her fellow assassins turned on her and tried to kill her, but they didn't kill her. But what they did is they injured her, and she went into a coma. And being on bed rest for however long she was, her muscles atrophied as well as her nerves. And in that, she had to use her will. So it's a scene where she wakes up out of her coma, and she kills the dudes that was taking advantage of her while she was in the coma, but her legs weren't working anymore. So she army crawled all the way out the hospital bed into a car, into a vehicle. When she got to the vehicle, she was laying there, and she was like, wiggle your toe. And she spent however many hours just trying to will her toe to move, and it wasn't moving. And all of a sudden, it was got the slightest movement. And what she said was, now that was the hard part. So the hard part was to reestablish communication. And now she sees that her will is working with the slightest movement, so now it's possible. So from that point on, she was able to will her body to come back into full functionality, and she was able to move. Similar to any type of brain injury, nervous system injury, stroke. You willed yourself to be able to function as great as you're functioning right now, against the odds of what they were telling you, because they were just looking at the physical picture. No, if there's damage on this part of the communication system, there's no way that you could even get a signal from here to there to do what you claim that you want to do anymore. Exactly. It's a done deal. You live in proof that what? You was able to do it. Before you couldn't get your words together, you couldn't talk. Now you're doing it. So somehow or another, either they misinterpreted what they were looking at, or what they looked at and actually saw and interpreted has now changed. Either way, you were able to will yourself beyond what the experts told you was possible for yourself. Meditation is a tool that allows us to access different aspects of our being, like Ron and Fabian said, to understand we got different divisions of our spirit, to access those things, realize them, access them, and utilize them in order that we may get a different understanding of what our essence is and the foundational aspect of what it is to be a human being. It changes the whole game.
Yes, it does.
That's what meditation is all about. It's a game changer, literally. Let's take a couple of minutes and then we get practical with it.
So one thing,
Yep.
Chef, was